it like to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with AT&T Next Up Anytime? It's like when you first light up the grill and think of all the mouth-watering possibilities. Learn how to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us and the latest iPhone every year with AT&T Next Up Anytime. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Apple Intelligence coming fall 2024 with Siri and device language set up to U.S. English. Some features and languages will be coming over the next year. $0 offer may not be available on future iPhones. Next Up Anytime feature may be discontinued at any time. Subject to change. Additional fees, terms, restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.
Alarming sounds of anguish and struggle. What could it be? Is someone in the house? Could it be intruders? What happened on that brisk December morning? Join us as we visit this captivating story that unfolds in the quaint town of Lithonia, Georgia, where a couple's life suddenly turns in minutes. But could it all be a hoax? What happens when love becomes fatal? This is the Fatal Attraction Podcast with An American Nightmare.
December 29th, 2009. It's the dead of night in Lithonia, Georgia, a peaceful community 30 miles east of Atlanta.
Lithonia is a small country town turned bedroom community. It's a quiet place where people come to buy a home and get away from the city.
But even in the sleepiest suburb, safety isn't guaranteed.
At 2 a.m., the Cab 911 received a frantic phone call from a homeowner.
The caller is 48-year-old Pamela Balon.
Cab County 911.
It's like somebody's in the house.
She heard ransacking throughout the house. Lots of loud noises, things falling, things being broken.
Tell me, where are you at in the house now? Closet. You're in the closet?
But a panicked Pamela tells the dispatcher that she's terrified for her husband, 53-year-old Ricky Balon.
Where's your husband at now? I don't know, right?
She said she heard her husband fighting with an intruder.
Somebody was hitting on him.
She also hears him say, "Gun, get a gun, get a gun."
But scared for her life, Pamela instead hid in the closet to call for help.
Do you still hear voices in the house?
But Pamela tells the dispatcher she does hear someone.
What did you hear? My husband calling for me.
Her husband was downstairs calling for help.
I should go downstairs. No, ma'am. Just stay where you are.
Originally from the island of Jamaica, Pamela and Ricky Balon came to America in 1984.
They just got married and were excited to start a family together. They decided it would be best to migrate to America.
Like a lot of immigrants, Pamela and Ricky had to hustle to establish themselves.
They settled in Lithonia, a quiet suburb of Atlanta, which seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Pamela was able to find a job as a travel agent. And then Ricky, he was basically taking any job that he could get his hands on.
It was a constant scramble to make ends meet. But the couple was determined to build a better life for themselves and their children.
Derek Jr. had been born shortly after the family arrived in the States.
Ricky also had an older son named David from a previous relationship.
Although born in Jamaica, David was living in Boston with his mom. He was able to come down for summers to visit with his father, Ricky, his stepmother, and his younger brother.
And by the time they were teenagers, both boys were busy helping their father.
Ricky had always dreamed of owning his own business, and before long, he had established his own landscaping company.
It was small to begin with, but Ricky really hustled hard.
He did quality work and had a great reputation.
And as suburban Atlanta boomed, so did Ricky's business.
More houses meant more yards needed landscaping, and Ricky was right on it.
Before long, Ricky was able to buy more mowers. He hired workers to add additional trucks and crews and was able to bid on much larger projects.
His business began to really take off. Eventually, they were able to enjoy all of the benefits of middle-class success.
The couple bought a big, beautiful home.
They were able to live well, send their kids to good schools, travel.
All the while, Ricky's business kept growing.
The projects were getting bigger and bigger.
Ricky found himself landing six-figure commercial landscaping contracts.
Pamela quit her job and she joined her husband's company. Ricky and Pamela really worked well together as a team.
Ricky was the front man who was out there handling the crews and handling the projects. Pamela was behind the scenes handling the books and helping to run the business.
And by 2009, the Balons were an American success story.
Ricky and Pamela were proud of what they had built together.
But now a horrific crime threatens to tear it all apart. On December 29, 2009, Lithonia 911 has just received a terrified call from Pamela.
Pamela had just called 911 to report what sounded like a break-in.
She can hear what sounds like a struggle happening downstairs. Her husband fighting with the intruder.
Even more terrifying, Pam says she can hear Ricky calling out for help.
You think I should go downstairs? No, ma'am.
The dispatcher warns her that the intruder may still be in the house.
Wait until the officer clears the location.
That had to be so terrifying for her, knowing something is going on with her husband and not being able to respond or react for fear of something happening to her.
She spends the majority of the 911 call pleading with the dispatcher to allow her to go check on him.
I need to go downstairs. Stay where you are.
After several agonizing minutes, police arrive on the scene.
The front door was locked, and despite the situation, officers didn't break it down.
Then after urging her to stay put, the dispatcher asked her to go downstairs to let in the police.
Stay on the phone with me and go and get the door. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am.
Still on the line with the operator, Pamela heads downstairs.
She breaks down completely as she lets the officers inside. The police find Ricky lying on the foyer floor.
There's a lot of blood. It's just a total mess.
It's a wife's worst nightmare.
Stay tuned for more of this unsettling story when we return with the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
What's it like to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with AT&T Next Up Anytime? It's like when you first light up the grill and think of all the mouth-watering possibilities. Learn how to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us and the latest iPhone every year with AT&T Next Up Anytime. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Apple Intelligence coming fall 2024 with Siri and device language set up to U.S. English. Some features and languages will be coming over the next year. $0 offer may not be available on future iPhones. Next Up Anytime feature may be discontinued at any time. Subject to change. Additional fees, terms, restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.
With a successful landscaping business and a beautiful suburban home, immigrants Ricky and Pamela Balon were an American success story.
By the end of 2009, Ricky and Pamela were really proud of what they had accomplished.
It wasn't easy. It required a lot of hard work, but they had built a life here in America.
Only now their American dream has turned into a nightmare.
Pamela just called 911 to report what sounds like a burglary in progress.
She believed Ricky had tried to fight off the intruder. As she went downstairs to let the officers in, she saw her husband's bloody body lying next to the front door. Ricky is badly beaten, and he's bleeding profusely from the head.
Imagine going downstairs and seeing your husband almost near to death.
Once Pamela's safely outside, officers sweep the house for the intruder.
The intruder apparently left the scene, but the house is ransacked.
Once the house was cleared, EMTs transport Ricky to the hospital.
Ricky was in really bad shape. He was non-communicative.
He is clinging to life,
As they load him into the ambulance, Pamela tries to climb on board, too.
Pamela was insistent that she get inside.
But detectives arrived on the scene, and they asked Pamela to wait to give them a statement.
Look, ma'am, I know you want to go be with your husband, but we really need to...
She was on the scene when the break-in occurred. So unless Ricky survives, she's their best witness.
I'll do what I can, but I really didn't see anything.
They asked her a lot of questions. She was cooperative.
According to Pamela, the night started off unexceptionally.
She said she had gotten home from the gym. Ricky was sitting in his favorite chair, surfing the internet.
You coming up to bed?
I'll be up in a minute.
Okay, I'm gonna go get that shower.
Pam said Ricky was still in his chair when she went upstairs.
She went to shower and she went to bed.
But Pamela says she woke up around 2 a.m.
She didn't know why she'd woken up, but when she did, Ricky wasn't in bed.
That was not unusual for him, because he kept real late hours. He liked to watch TV.
Once awake, Pamela says she'd gotten up and gone to the bathroom.
She's in there for a while when she starts hearing sounds.
What kind of sounds?
Sounds like something moving around downstairs.
Someone other than Ricky.
She says she heard Ricky say to someone, "Who are you? What are you doing here?"
That made her believe that there was an intruder in the house.
And according to Pamela, what Ricky said next erased any doubt.
She says she heard Ricky yell up to her to go get the gun.
Ricky wanted me to get the gun. He keeps it in the nightstand by the bed.
But you didn't get it?
No, I was too afraid.
She cheerfully admitted that she should have gotten the gun, but she was too afraid.
She instead locked herself in the bedroom.
Pamela says that as she huddled in the bathroom, Ricky had apparently tried to fight off the intruder.
Pam said that that's when she heard the crashing and the banging downstairs, like there was some kind of struggle. She said she wasn't entirely sure how long she had stayed hidden in the bathroom. It could have been 2 minutes, it could have been 10 minutes. She was too terrified to know.
I was too afraid, thinking they were going to come up there and find me.
They? So there was more than one intruder?
I don't know. Maybe?
She says that she heard ransacking throughout the house. Lots of loud noises, things falling, things being broken.
Until, according to Pamela, the noises suddenly stopped.
She heard it get quiet downstairs, and she thought that that was the opportunity to dash to the bedroom, get the phone, and call 911. Even though she didn't hear anyone, Pamela was scared the intruders were still in the house, so she hid in the closet and called for help.
Pamela says it was while on the phone with 911 that she heard a new horrifying sound.
She can hear Ricky faintly calling out for her. Pam begins desperately pleading with the dispatcher to allow her to go check on her husband.
Ricky was calling for me, and I told her I should go down there and help him.
But the dispatcher says, "No, stay where you are, where it's safe." She said she hadn't gone back downstairs until the police arrived. She saw Ricky lying on the foyer floor.
I should have came down sooner.
She feels very guilty.
In hindsight, she should have gotten the gun, but she was too afraid.
It was a traumatic situation, to be sure.
This must have been her worst nightmare.
And it was about to get worse.
Just as Pamela was finishing her statement, the detectives got an urgent call from the hospital.
I should have came down sooner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Pam, you need to go to the hospital.
Oh my God. If she wants to see Ricky one last time, she better get to the hospital.
Stay tuned for more of this unsettling story when we return with the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
While talking to detectives about the apparent home invasion and vicious assault on her husband, Ricky, Pamela Balon has just received horrific news.
Pam learns that if she wants to see Ricky one last time, she has to get to the hospital immediately.
a neighbor drives the distraught Pamela to Atlanta's Grady Memorial Hospital.
Grady is the premier trauma center in the region. Grady has a reputation for saving people.
But there's nothing they can do for Ricky.
When Pamela arrives at the hospital, she receives notice that there is no hope for Ricky's recovery.
Ricky was struck in the head with a blunt object. He's essentially brain dead.
He could survive indefinitely on life support, but he will never regain consciousness.
When Pamela and Ricky's son, Derek Jr., arrive at the hospital, he and his mother face a difficult choice.
Pam knew that quality of life was really important, and at that moment she had to decide whether or not she would make her husband live an existence that wasn't consistent with the man that he was, just for her sake, because she wanted him around, and she chose to let him go.
It wasn't just Pamela's decision, it was Pamela and their adult son's decision to ask that no further resuscitative means be utilized.
For detectives at the crime scene, it means their investigation will soon be upgraded to a homicide. And the evidence points to a likely motive.
Based on the scene, police were thinking that this started out as a robbery. The house was ransacked.
There was furniture everywhere, drawers poured out.
Pictures hanging off the wall, broken glass pieces on the floor.
The Christmas tree was turned over.
They also found blood spatter all throughout the first floor, so it looks like there was a knockdown, drag-out struggle.
In the foyer, near where the killer left Ricky for dead, detectives also find what they believe to be the murder weapon.
Not far from the foyer, there was a decorative statue that was smeared with blood, and it appeared heavy enough and solid enough to have caused Ricky's injuries.
Finally, at the back of the house, detectives find where the intruders apparently made entry.
They find pry marks on the back door.
The intruder apparently jimmied the lock.
It appeared the person had planned to slip in and out quietly while everyone was asleep.
They didn't expect anyone to be downstairs.
Based on all the signs, his death appears to be the result of a burglary gone wrong.
Except there's one thing that doesn't add up.
Nothing appears to be missing.
The TV, the jewelry, the cash, the valuables, they were still there in plain sight.
Which naturally raises questions for detectives.
Had the killer or the thieves lost their nerve? Or had the crime scene been staged to look like a robbery to cover Ricky's murder?
Looking for answers, police canvass the area and speak with the Balon's neighbors.
The neighbors are obviously upset and scared because things like this don't happen in this type of neighborhood.
Did you see or hear?
Lithonia, the crime rate is considerably low comparing to Atlanta, Fulton County, or Gwinnett County.
Neighbors were especially horrified that something like this had happened to the Balons.
Everyone the detective spoke with said that Pamela and Ricky were nice neighbors and a great couple.
People knew them as hardworking people. They were nice people and were very shocked that this happened.
Neighbors have no idea who would want to hurt Ricky.
Nor had anyone witnessed anything suspicious in the neighborhood that night.
No one has heard anything. No one saw anything.
Although one neighbor says she did observe something odd recently.
One neighbor said that she noticed a strange vehicle, a black SUV, parked across from the Balon's home on several occasions.
She said it was almost as if someone was watching the Balon's house.
The detectives wondered if Ricky was having trouble with someone that the neighbors might not have known about.
Could he have been in debt to someone? Was he dealing with a disgruntled employee? Or really, it could be anyone.
As the sun rises and detectives head back to the station, it isn't long before they get the news they've been anticipating.
At about 10 a.m. that morning, Ricky dies.
With the clock ticking now to find Ricky's murderer, Investigators waste no time inviting Pamela down to the station to give a formal statement.
Coming in, I know this is a difficult time for you.
Pamela was still very upset, and she seemed shocked that anyone would want to break in their home and harm Ricky.
I thought this was just a burglary.
Well, that's what we're trying to find out.
Pamela told detectives that as far as she knew, Ricky didn't have any enemies.
Was he having any problems with the business?
No.
However, there's one other possibility that detectives will need to rule out.
They started asking her questions about whether she had been seeing anyone, whether Ricky had been seeing anyone. A lot of personal questions.
No, everything was fine.
Pamela also says she has no idea who might be in the black SUV a neighbor spotted lurking around the house in the days leading up to the murder.
No, I don't know anything about that.
But while Pamela's statement offers no new leads for detectives,
Hi, Derek.
Pamela and Ricky's son, Derek Jr.'s, does.
There's something about my dad y'all probably need to know about.
He says that detectives should talk to his dad's girlfriend.
His girlfriend?
Yeah. He tells authorities that his father had been having an affair.
Stay tuned for more of this unsettling story when we return with the Fatal Attraction podcast.
What's it like to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with AT&T Next Up Anytime? It's like when you first light up the grill and think of all the mouth-watering possibilities. Learn how to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us and the latest iPhone every year with AT&T Next Up Anytime. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Apple Intelligence coming fall 2024 with Siri and device language set up to U.S. English. Some features and languages will be coming over the next year. $0 offer may not be available on future iPhones. Next Up Anytime feature may be discontinued at any time. Subject to change. Additional fees, terms, restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.
Pamela and Ricky Balon's son, Derek Jr., has just revealed to detectives that his father may have been having an affair at the time of his death.
According to his son, the woman that his dad had been having an affair with was an Atlanta woman by the name of Carolyn Hodges.
She's an old family friend that Ricky had run into at a family funeral.
How do you know he was having an affair?
He wasn't exactly discreet.
Derek says that he overheard his dad chatting with a woman on the phone on several occasions.
Now, did your mom know about his girlfriend?
I tried to tell her.
Derek Jr. told police that his mom didn't believe it and didn't want to hear.
The detectives are definitely interested, though.
Maybe the mistress was angry that Ricky wasn't giving her what she wanted.
All right, I'll walk you out.
Attempting to confirm whether Ricky was truly having an affair, investigators pull his phone records.
What they discover is several late-night phone calls that trace back to Carolyn Hodges.
There was even a phone call the night of the incident between Ricky and this woman.
However, when detectives bring Caroline in for questioning, she says that was no affair.
She says that she and Ricky were merely old friends.
She admits that her and Ricky did talk on the phone quite often. She said it was just catching up at first, and ultimately it led to Ricky talking to her because he wanted her advice.
Advice about what?
Well, he and Pam were going through a rough patch.
What did you say?
According to Caroline, it was Pam, not Ricky, who had been having the affair.
She said that Ricky found out he just didn't know what to do about it.
No.
Caroline says that Pam's boyfriend was a police officer named Antonio Vargas.
According to Carolyn, Antonio and Pam go to the same gym. And when Ricky found out about the affair, he was very upset.
But she says he also blamed himself.
He had been so focused on his business and working long hours.
I told him talk to Pam about it.
Well, did he follow your advice?
Yes.
Ricky had confronted Pam about the affair, and she had broken things off with Vargas.
Her and Ricky had reconciled and were going to do their best to make the most of it.
If Caroline's telling the truth, detectives see a few possibilities.
Vargas was angry about the breakup. Did he possibly seek revenge by killing Ricky?
Or maybe Pam hadn't really ended things with Vargas.
Maybe they were plotting together to remove Ricky from the picture so that they could be together.
Or could the most likely scenario be that Caroline was pointing the finger at Pam to throw detectives off her track?
Maybe she wanted to be more than friends with Ricky and gotten angry when he rejected her.
However, a quick check of Caroline's phone records rules her out as a suspect.
According to her cell phone records, she had called Ricky from her sister's house in North Carolina.
There's no way that she could have committed the crime.
What's more, it appears there may be something to Caroline's story about Antonio Vargas.
They determined that he owned an SUV that was similar to the SUV that neighbors reported that was lurking in the neighborhood.
Was it possible that Vargas had been scoping out the scene?
But if that was the case, why didn't Pamela say anything when detectives brought it up with her? When investigators bring Antonio in for questioning, he doesn't deny the affair.
We just met at the gym. You know, one thing leads to another.
He said she felt neglected by her husband, so he was more than happy to step in.
You still seeing her?
Nah, we just hooked up a few times.
He characterizes it as just a fling.
He says that he really didn't care whether or not she reconciled with her husband.
That's when investigators confront him about the black SUV.
Then why you hanging around her place?
What are you talking about?
He denies that it was his SUV in the neighborhood.
Look, if an SUV looks like mine, it's just a coincidence.
Antonio also denies having anything to do with Ricky's death.
When he was asked what he was doing the night of the murder, he said he was working.
A quick check with the Atlanta police appears to confirm Antonio's alibi.
He was on duty at the time of the murder and had answered a call a half hour away from the crime scene.
They ruled him out as a suspect.
It looks as if the investigation is at a dead end. Until Ricky's son, David, arrives from Boston with new information for detectives.
There's something you ought to know.
Well, tell us.
He tells the detectives that his father was furious over the fact that she was skimming money from the landscaping business.
David says it all started when his father asked Pamela to take over running things in the office.
He preferred to be physically on the job site and doing the hands-on work.
However, according to David, trouble soon surfaced.
When he did check the books, he noticed what he thought were some irregularities.
You talked to her about it?
Yeah.
David stated his stepmom assured Ricky that it was no big deal. She just had different ways of doing things than what he was used to.
David said that his father had bought Pam's excuses at first.
David says that things eventually came to a head when his dad started having trouble paying the company's bills and meeting payroll.
Man, this doesn't make sense. What's going on with the money?
Ricky, I've told you where the money is going.
I can't even pay the employees.
David said his dad was so upset that he was about to open up a separate bank account that Pam wouldn't have access to.
According to David, Ricky was so fed up, he was ready to file for divorce.
Well, do you know who was handling your dad's divorce?
Well, I'm not sure he'd gotten that far.
Ricky had not filed for divorce or actually reached out to an attorney. The detectives only had David's word for it.
But when police start digging deeper into the Balon's marriage, they discover that Pamela may have had a bigger motive than anyone imagined.
There was a life insurance policy with Pamela as the beneficiary.
Shortly before his murder, Ricky had drastically increased his life insurance coverage.
Pamela stood to gain more than $1 million from her husband's death.
Stay tuned for more of this unsettling story when we return with the Fatal Attraction podcast.
What's it like to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with AT&T Next Up Anytime? It's like when you first light up the grill and think of all the mouth-watering possibilities. Learn how to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us and the latest iPhone every year with AT&T Next Up Anytime. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Apple Intelligence coming fall 2024 with Siri and device language set up to U.S. English. Some features and languages will be coming over the next year. $0 offer may not be available on future iPhones. Next Up Anytime feature may be discontinued at any time. Subject to change. Additional fees, terms, restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.
DeKalb County detectives have just discovered that Pamela Balon may have had a powerful motive to murder her husband, Ricky.
Prior to Ricky's murder, his life insurance policy had been drastically increased.
Pamela stood to gain more than $1 million from her husband's death.
The landscaping business, their big, beautiful home, all of their assets, and everything that they owned would be hers and hers alone.
But according to her stepson David, the window for Pamela to collect had been closing fast.
According to David, Ricky was ready to file for divorce.
But before he could even file for a divorce or consult a lawyer, he was murdered.
Did that mean Pamela had killed him? Detectives suspect that's the case, but they have little proof.
There was no forensic evidence tying Pamela to the murder.
With their hands tied, detectives bring Pamela back into the station, this time to confront her with her lies.
With no other leads and no other suspects, they hope to pry a confession out of her.
Why did you lie to us about the affair?
Because it was over. My husband just died, and I didn't see any reason for airing out our dirty laundry.
The detectives also pressed Pamela about the $1 million insurance policy.
Well, why did you increase the insurance policy?
That was not my idea.
She said this is something that they did jointly.
Still, the detectives keep pressing.
They questioned her for hours.
Come on, Pam. You did it. And then you tried to make it look like a break-in.
Detective, I would never hurt Ricky.
She stuck to her story that this was actually a home invasion.
But the fact that Pamela won't crack makes no difference to detectives.
At the end of the interview, they placed Pam under arrest for murder.
There were just too many inconsistencies in her version of events for detectives to ignore.
News of Pam's arrest stuns the couple's neighbors.
This appeared to be a perfect couple.
It was really hard for people to wrap their mind around the fact that Pam could do something so heinous.
But as you started to hear about affairs and you started to hear about skimming, some people thought, could she have done it?
When the case goes to trial in June of 2014, the prosecutors begin by arguing that Pamela was the only person with a clear motive to kill her husband.
A pending divorce, a life insurance policy of more than $1 million. They said that was the motive for murder.
They maintained that Pamela Balon was a woman who was looking to get out of a marriage that she was no longer happy in. The fact that she'd had an affair, and that she would get the spoils of the business if her husband was no longer around.
So, according to the prosecutors, Pamela had killed her husband in cold blood.
Prosecutors alleged that Ricky was asleep in his recliner on the first floor of the couple's home. Pam crept up as he slept.
She was armed with a statue she grabbed off a nearby table.
There was no struggle. Ricky was incapacitated after the first blow.
Once he was down, she dragged her dying husband into the foyer.
Then, as her husband lay dying in the foyer, Pamela faked a home invasion.
They were painting a good picture for the jury that this was a scene that appeared to be staged.
Prosecutors focused on the fact that while the house appeared to be ransacked, no valuables seemed to be missing, and there was very little damage to any of their possessions.
The stage set. Prosecutors claimed that Pamela had cleaned herself and then placed a carefully rehearsed call to 911.
She proceeded to give the performance of a lifetime.
When it's the defense's turn, Pamela's attorney claims that the prosecution's case is pure speculation.
Prosecution's theory sounded good, but they had no real proof.
There was simply no evidence to indicate that these two individuals were at the cusp of a divorce, and certainly no divorce that was pending at the time, and no evidence to support that assertion other than some hearsay.
What you working on, baby?
The defense also pushes back on the notion that Pamela was after Ricky's money.
They called an accountant to the stand, and he said he viewed the books, and he found no evidence that Pam had been skimming money from the company.
Pamela wasn't taking any money from the business wasn't losing any money. There was simply nothing to support that assertion. And that's all it was an assertion. There were statements given by folks who thought that this was the reason that Pamela and Ricky were not getting along, and there simply wasn't any evidence to support it. And the books, the paperwork, and the testimony of the accountant himself disproved that.
Most of all, according to the defense, the prosecution's entire theory was based on a false assumption.
The most devastating blow to the prosecutor's case is when the defense brought the insurance agent to the stand. The insurance agent testified that he was the person who had actually suggested that the policy be increased. They could have gotten more coverage under a different policy, and it made sense to him, and it ultimately made sense to Pamela and to Ricky, who agreed to have the policy increased. So this theory that this was a murder for insurance money just didn't really hold any water.
In fact, the defense is so confident that they destroyed the prosecution's arguments that they asked the judge to dismiss the case.
It's called a directed verdict of acquittal.
In a shocking blow to the prosecution, the judge decides to consider it.
He said, "I'm going to take it under advisement."
But not before he hears the jury's verdict first.
He wanted the case to go to the jury.
After the jury made their decision, the judge would decide whether to accept the verdict or throw it out.
"53-year-old Pamela Balon's murder trial has just taken an unprecedented turn."
Pam had been accused of killing her husband, Ricky, in order to collect his $1 million life insurance policy.
The defense was so sure the prosecution had not proved his case, they asked the judge to throw out the charges.
The judge decided to wait and to defer to the jury's ruling before he made any decisions.
When they heard his decision, the defense and Pamela's family thought that the judge was expecting an acquittal.
Would they be mistaken?
After a significant amount of deliberation, the jury came back and they found Pamela guilty.
Pam's family was totally blindsided and could not understand how the jury arrived at that decision.
On the other hand, Ricky's family and supporters were very pleased with the jury's decision. They thought they got it right.
Now the question is whether the judge will abide by their decision.
He still had the option of throwing out the case and the guilty verdict.
When the jury came back and found her guilty, he was just as surprised as we were.
Although it became apparent that he was in no hurry to make his decision.
The judge decided he needed a month to decide whether or not to toss out the case.
I honestly believe that the court simply thought that the jury got it wrong, notwithstanding the jury verdict, and set Pamela free. The court allowed Miss Balon to go home.
Pam was released on bond and would remain free until the judge came back with a decision.
This time, it's Ricky's family who were blindsided and outraged.
It's just a slap in the face for the whole family.
She walked out the courtroom just like we did. I feel like he was just killed all over again. That's how I felt. Because we didn't get justice.
Ricky's family gave interviews to the television news reporters proclaiming how the judge had allowed a murderer to go free.
As far as they were concerned, Pamela shouldn't be out walking the streets.
The prosecutors are just as livid.
The DA is so upset by this that in just a few days, he's able to make a motion to have Pam brought back into custody pending the judge's decision on the motion.
There was so much commotion, there was so much made of it, that ultimately the judge had Miss Balon come back in.
But would she soon be out again? It all comes down to the judge's decision.
Pam's family, friends, and attorney are all confident that Pam will be freed once the judge makes his ruling. But it's their turn to be outraged once again when the judge affirms the jury's verdict of murder.
The judge ultimately sentenced her on a murder charge.
And since she was found guilty of murder, there was only one sentence the judge can hand down.
Georgia doesn't have degrees of murder. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
The outcome is a startling reversal for Pamela and her family. One they refuse to accept.
We filed an appeal. We filed what's called a motion for new trial. Another judge looked at that motion for new trial and decided that there were irregularities, that she had not been fairly tried, and the case was overturned.
She was granted a new trial in 2017.
At this point, the prosecution knows what the defense's arguments are. And so they tried a different case. It was a more emotional case. Pamela testified, whereas she did not in the first trial. Ultimately, I believe the jury made their decision in that second trial upon whether they found Pamela to be credible or not. I don't believe they did. And that second jury found her guilty.
For Ricky's family, it was a hard-earned victory.
The right person is behind bars. The right person was implicated for his murder.
Meanwhile, Pamela's supporters remain just as convinced she has suffered a great injustice.
You're never going to be able to convince me that Pamela Balon murdered Ricky Balon.
Although no matter who killed Pamela's husband, there's one thing everyone agrees on.
Ricky did not deserve to die this way.
This was a loving father, a man who people said was universally admired for his hard work. Starting from nothing, he made the American dream come true, only to lose it in the most horrible way. It's really an all-around tragedy for everybody involved.
Embarking on a journey of reconciliation, restarting and embracing new beginnings can be challenging, particularly when navigating troubled relationships consisting of deceits, infidelity, and distrust. This story reminds us that we can never really know someone, especially in matters of love, money, and betrayal. With steadfast determination and a relentless drive, Rick Balon will forever hold a cherished place in the hearts of those who loved him. Coming up on the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
This hard-working single mom held her tight-knit family together.
She was lovable, caring. She's the one you can go and talk to.
Until a tragic crime tears the family apart.
There was a gunshot wound to her forehead. I couldn't really believe it.
No one deserves that.
It was horrible. Like, who did this?
On a balmy July morning, workers make a shocking discovery on nearby train tracks, forever changing the future of a close-knit family. Detectives are on the hunt to find out what happened to Ramona Jackson. Tune in to the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast. We will see you in the next episode.
What's it like to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with AT&T Next Up Anytime? It's like when you first light up the grill and think of all the mouth-watering possibilities. Learn how to get the new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us and the latest iPhone every year with AT&T Next Up Anytime. AT&T, connecting changes everything. Apple Intelligence coming fall 2024 with Siri and device language set up to U.S. English. Some features and languages will be coming over the next year. $0 offer may not be available on future iPhones. Next Up Anytime feature may be discontinued at any time. Subject to change. Additional fees, terms, restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.